Well, we're here this afternoon as part of the 70th anniversary celebration for Little River United Church of Christ. I'm Brian Payne. I've been here since 1989.
I'm Barbara Shepard. We joined in 1993.
Steve Wheelock, we came in 1988.
And I'm Pam Binninger. We joined in 1982.
Okay, so we've got a lot of history here, and the idea is this afternoon we're going to talk about memories, anecdotes, stories, and things that we think are significant about the church, and past ministers, choir, whatever we come up with. But one of my favorites was always the day we were here for a work day, working outside, and Vern often showed up for that and was participating. He was pruning the bushes in front of the window outside his office and ran into a wasp's nest. Dropped his pruning shears, took off running up into the parking lot, and we could see the wasps around him. And we're hollering, "Keep running, Vern, keep running." Well, poor Vern had a pacemaker, and
That's right.
and he ran all the way up to the top of the parking lot, and finally they quit chasing him. But I can't remember whether he made the next work session or not. Anyway, there's lots of things about Vern. Another thing I remember about Vern, he only wore socks when he was at church in his office. He always took his shoes off. And if you walked in to see him, and he was often here, of course, he was in his stocking feet, very comfortable. But that reminds me of the socks story from the Footsteps trip in Germany, when Jane Filkins found in Wittenberg, where the Martin Luther nailed the theses on the door. Mm-hmm. She bought him a pair of Martin Luther socks that said on them, "Here I stand, I can do no other." Every year after that, on Reformation Sunday, if you went up to Vern and said, "Let me see your socks," he'd pull up his pants, and sure enough, he had his Martin Luther socks on. So, Vern was a lot of fun.
Yeah, he had a great sense of humor. I am remembering the old First Fridays that we used to do for young people here, where they would come, the parents could drop them off, have a little free babysitting, and there was always a program. And somehow, and I don't remember why Vern thought of this particular topic, but he thought of manners, that he wanted the kids to hear something about manners. And I don't know, we were talking about it, and I said, that's true. I remember being taught manners, and he said, let's do this First Friday program. So we did, and wrote it out. We're very careful about it, and he decided that we should be called Mr. and Mrs. Manners as we were presenting. So for weeks afterwards, the kids thought that we were married. The program went really well, but we confused a lot of people.
That's a good story.
Oh, man.
My main memory of Vern is sitting in the dunk tank at one of the events that we put on.
Yes.
I don't even remember what it was. But
It may have been another anniversary.
It probably, I think it probably was. But yeah, the kids had great fun because one of them was I think he was a Little League pitcher.
Oh, so he was good.
He was good.
And dump Vern in the tub. Yeah.
Over and over again.
I remember seeing Sue Detterman climb out of there, just soaked.
Yeah.
Soaked. But there's something special about sending your pastors into the water.
Oh, sure.
And there were plenty of baptism jokes that went with that.
Oh, yeah.
I remember, and kind of in keeping with what you were talking about, Steve, that he liked to be a part of the youth group, and he would be out playing with them and whatever. They were playing dodgeball out in the parking lot, and my son was, a pitcher. Well, he smacked him pretty good with a ball. I thought, oh, terrific, just terrific. But he was such a good sport, such a wonderful sport. It's like being dunked. He was a great sport.
Yeah.
So great sense of humor. Absolutely.
Do you remember his the dinner we had for the 10th anniversary of his time here? We had a dinner and we wanted to keep it secret from him. And so Sue Detterman and Julie Ahrens combined on a story where we could keep the dinner secret from Vern and yet get him here. And that was that the church had been broken into about 20 minutes before the dinner was to start. And Sue called and said, the church has been broken into. And Julie said, ahead of time, he'll just say, let's turn that over to the trustees. But if we tell him that they broke into his office, he would be here in seconds. So that was the story. Sue called and told him that the church had been broken into, the police were here, and they had gotten into his office. And he said, I'll be right there. And he left, and of course, and they were going to go out to dinner. Julie had arranged that, so they were dressed for dinner. So he got in the car and drove over here. She got in her car 2 or 3 minutes behind and drove over, and they pulled into the parking lot, and Sue Detterman went out into the parking lot to tell him, Vern, this is all a joke. This was to get you here for this dinner, and that's why there's so many other cars here in the parking lot.
Did he take it pretty well?
He took it very well, yes. By the time he came in, of course, and everybody was cheering and clapping, and he was still a little stunned, but it got that morning. But
I remember when he got his pacemaker. It was a dinner for 8, and it was the week of a dinner for 8, and it was the night or 2 before he had collapsed and had gone in and gotten his pacemaker. And everybody is thinking, I think it was the same day. And so we were in his group, and he was supposed to come in, and he was supposed to be there, but nobody expected him to come because he figured he's in the hospital and all that. Well, here comes Vern. And he walks in and he says, now, I'm okay, everything's fine, but I want you to know that my doctor says that I really need stimulating conversation now. And they were off to the races.
Oh,
my God. I thought he had that attack at the baker's house.
Yeah, I think.
That's right.
Yeah.
So they rushed him off to the hospital, and then the dinner for 8 group was just a few days later.
I think it was the same day.
Yeah,
Oh my goodness! Oh,
it was at the dinner table. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't there, but yeah, I heard about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. He literally collapsed at the dinner table. Yeah.
my goodness! My goodness!
That is something. So, I think some of my most fond memories of Vern is just how meaningful his lessons were, his preaching. I was thinking, I never left the church feeling I wasn't moved by something when he gave his sermons. He was a very, very special minister, very special pastor to us.
I think more than one of us suggested that Vern publish some of his sermons, and I think he was thinking about that. I don't know if he ever did that.
Well, he printed them all. He had those typed out ahead of time, and those were available. I've got copies of some of the ones that I particularly enjoyed. That was before we started recording all of them.
Yeah.
But he had good ones. Almud and I used to, on the way home, sometimes review the 3 points that he'd made in his sermon, and usually there were 3 or 4 points. It was beautiful. You could remember the whole thing.
He would always start off with something about his own sort of. He was quick to laugh at himself, or point out his own foibles, if you will. And he'd start stories. I remember him talking about, don't draw such a strict line in the sand with your kids because then you're stuck with it. He had told his daughter, if she didn't do whatever, she was going to miss the bus, she was going to have to walk, I don't know, something about school, and he got sucked into it all. I mean, it was, it was like, and here I was, I made the mistake, His sermons always had wonderful messages. They were special.
Yeah.
So,
Now, did you travel with him on the
Yes.
footsteps?
Yes, about 3 or 4 times, and that was wonderful because on overseas trips where you've got time in a bus or on the ship or in a plane, time for real long conversations, and that was super. Vern was really a tremendous supporter of the Footsteps series. It was Floyd Fithian who apparently came up with the idea. At that point, Congressman Floyd Fithian, who said to Vern that this group ought to get in touch with its heritage and go some of the places where our church had originated. And there was another fellow, Helmut Wagner, had got involved in that, and they started out and came up with the idea of the first trip, which was to the Holy Land. I didn't get into it because we were just back from overseas until the next year to Greece and Turkey. And I remember talking with him at one point. We had lived in France. I said, gee, Vern, we ought to go to France. He says, well, but first, we have to go to Germany because we've got Martin Luther. And then we probably have to go to England because that's where the Pilgrims came from. They had this thing all laid out. I mean, the conceptual work was done, and I got into it and enjoyed it tremendously. But yeah, those are fun. Pam, you went on many.
Yeah, I went on several. Starting with Italy. So it
Oh,
was
yes.
a ways. Yeah. And and Jenna was involved also. When we went to Armenia, I think that was probably were you?
I missed
you
that one.
missed that one. That's
Yeah.
what I was thinking. Yeah. So, but Jenna and Sam, did that trip. Yeah. And that was special.
Yeah.
So,
They were special. Yeah.
Jen and Vern were a great combination.
Yeah.
Indeed they were. Indeed they were.
I still miss her.
Yeah, when you ask us to do this, Brian, I was thinking about what are my most treasured memories, and I think probably some of them obviously involve Jenna. She was the driver behind our women's ministry, which survives today and still thrives. And she brought such enthusiasm to it, such wonderful ideas. That. Some of us have been involved with it for a number of years, and her leadership was essential. Yeah. So I do.
Wasn't Jenna
I miss her
also
too.
behind the labyrinth? The idea of our building a labyrinth?
I don't remember what she could very well have been. I'm not sure. Do you know, Barb? I don't know whether she was. I'm trying to think of who inspired it. There was. Kathy
Spar.
There we go. Kathy Spar. Probably she did take it to Jenna. That makes sense. I don't know, but yeah.
Well, and it's still there.
Yes.
Like women's ministry. It's
Still here. We're still here.
we're still here.
We're still here. Yeah. And one of the outcomes for me personally was that I joined a covenant group out of one of our retreats. And the covenant group it was originally four women, and then it grew to 6, and there's the 6 of us still meet. We still are, we still see each other once every month or two as a covenant group. So.
Oh, that's nice. How about choir memories? 2 of you were in the choir. I remember Tom Colahan when he was here. The main thing I remember about him was that at one point the choir gave him this gigantic clock. Because he was often late to rehearsal.
Always.
Or late on Sunday mornings, right?
Always late.
Always.
But thank you for bringing up Tom, because that was the one big memory that I have. And like I said before, Almut will remember this. You may very well. Florence Moncure was our organist for a very long time, very good organist. She would come to accompany us at choir rehearsals. And we came in one night, and Florence wasn't there. And Tom just kind of hemmed and hawed around it and didn't say anything, and we proceeded. We were working on the Fauré Requiem, and we were having a little bit of trouble, I think, with the, there's a movement in Paradisum. There's a very floaty, ethereal sound. And at the end of the rehearsal, Tom sat us down, and everything got fairly serious. We weren't quite sure yet, but we were about to find out. Tom said, okay, Florence's husband, Charles, travels for a living, and he was in Florida, and a drunk driver crossed the center line and hit him head on. And so he was killed. He sang in the choir as bass. And so Tom, who was Catholic, I think still is, actually did a couple of readings, said a prayer or two, and then he said, "Okay," and I'm gonna get all emotional again. He said, "Okay, take out the In Paradisum, and let's sing Charles Home." And it was possibly the most gorgeous singing I have ever heard out of this choir.
Yeah.
I never heard that story. That is nice, or if I did from Elmwood, I don't remember it.
Yeah, she would have been
Yeah.
there, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Almwood actually was very much shocked when he made the announcement.
Yeah. Tom was a wonderful choir director, wasn't he?
Still is.
Yes, still is. My goodness, running the master chorale. Yeah.
And then who succeeded Tom? Was it Chad Steffi?
Chad Tiffy and his wife Chad's wife helped also with the choir, didn't she?
I don't think so. I don't.
Well, anyway,
I
it
don't
was
remember.
Chad.
Yeah.
Linda,
But,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, yeah, but I do remember the thing I was going toward is the 50th anniversary CD that was made for that year, and how much fun and hard work
Yeah.
that was. It was a lot of music. It was, at the time, we had a contemporary choir too, with that
Julie
Holm.
Yeah.
really
And Mark.
was behind. And that also brought in a little Catholic flavor. She loved the Catholic contemporary tunes. And then Chad, who was with the Air Force, got reassigned and had to move. And it ended up being, okay, we've got all this music, who's going to produce it? And it was Craig and Dave Shepard, who worked in the studio for days and days and days to get it finally produced and ready to go.
Filtering out the sounds of motorcycles out on the street.
Oh, really? Oh.
Which Chad stopped us a couple of times. I remember that. He stopped us a couple of times. He stopped us a couple of times because there was a bird singing too loud outside the window.
Yeah. But I think it was Ave Verum that we ended up singing in the atrium because there's so much
the sound
in there that it was, and it was really special. That's the great thing about choir is, for me, is hearing everybody else's voice kind of inside me and around me. It's such a strong community, and we've had great leadership.
You had a CD made of it, right?
Yeah.
Didn't we? I'm sure I have that somewhere. I don't know where. Do you still have it?
Who pulls out a CD anymore? Nobody.
I know.
But
Well,
yes, I do for sure.
Actually, to a matter of confession here, it's on my phone.
No. There you go.
I copied it onto my phone.
I should do that.
I know where our copy is. We've got it. And every now and then I'll move once I listen to it. And Riley Reid
Riley
was one of the, did a solo on that, didn't he?
Yes, he
and
did.
Riley Reid was one of our first gay members. And Steve, I think you said that, didn't you, the expression that Riley made it cool to be gay or something like that?
Probably something like that,
He was
yeah.
wonderful.
But he's a wonderful man.
With that rich voice of his. And I know Vern said that he always wished that he had Riley preach one day because he had been a Baptist minister somewhere.
That's right. And you know, a voice that you could a voice like syrup. I mean, you could sit and listen to him all day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember we were doing a performance, and we were seated up here. I say performance, and Riley got sick and couldn't sing his solo, and so I was asked to sing it. Two very different voices.
Yes.
So we got through it, and after it was over, I called Riley and I said, I just want you to know, you're going to hear me if you hear the recording, and you were missed. I just said some things, and Riley really appreciated that. It was very sweet.
Yeah.
He was very gracious.
How about open mic nights? I remember open mic nights. We did that. In fact, I even looked at the time when I was the moderator, MC.
You were a great MC.
And Almut, it was fun. And Almut had helped me by translating some of the Bach cantata titles into English, and I introduced people leading off with a particular Bach cantata, and I got a couple of them here. There was BWV 211. I led off with that, "Be quiet, don't chatter." That's a Bach cantata. Another one is, "Dear God, when am I going to die?" I don't know who I introduced with that one. It might have been somebody older with a sense of humor like Charlie Schaefer.
Yeah.
And then the final one was BWV 144, "Take what's yours and leave." and that's a Bach cantata. Well, it got to the point where every time I started to introduce somebody, everybody started to laugh as soon as I mentioned Bach.
That's a lot of pressure.
So, Almut spent a good bit of time translating these things, and we would pick out different ones with the most outrageous words to them. But they were all real. They were all real.
Yeah. You were a great MC, I have to say.
Yeah.
Those were fun nights.
We had so many people participate in open mic night.
Yeah. Kids
Yeah.
to adults. Yeah.
And the band, Steve
and
Hube, and of course Dave, and
Chad.
Julie's sister, and a lot of Julie's brother.
Oh yeah.
Phil Ham.
Phil Ham.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those were good times.
Yeah, they were.
Had friends come in from outside. There were a couple toward the end of the series, if you will. I remember doing the bass part on Proud Mary to a visitor.
We may have to resurrect that. It's the season.
Yeah.
As I sit here in this spot, I remember the celebration dinner after Building with Faith, when we had built out the church. And we had a big dinner, and then of course I was the MC for the after dinner presentation with all sorts of people. And we presented rocks to people. I forget what that was, but the Rock of Ages and Rock of this and that. And I had all my jokes figured out ahead of time. But I got the biggest laugh ever when I looked down here and said, yes, and in this part of the sanctuary, we have the Time with Children trapdoor. Everybody got the joke right away. It was because we've all been there with Time for Children when it would get a little out of hand sometimes, and the kids would really get going. And Vern only had time with children once a month. And I think he got as big a kick out of that as anybody else. But yeah, I said the door opens and they go down a chute and they're directed to their classrooms. They're sorted out automatically and they end up in their classroom. Then the door closes and we go on with the service. Yeah. Oh my. Yeah.
Trying to remember if it was Vern that suggested that we install one behind the pulpit for guest preachers.
That we do what?
That we install one behind the pulpit for guest preachers.
Oh, yes, okay. If the sermon runs too long?
Sermon runs too long, yes.
Somebody pushes a button, yeah.
Well,
Being fond of a 13-minute sermon, I would have enjoyed that.
And as I'm sitting next to you, Steve, I'm thinking about the first White Christmas where you were wearing the hats. The Kings were wearing the hats.
Oh, yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah.
When you all came down, you must have been about 8 feet tall.
I was taller than I am now, yes.
The white gift service, yeah, that was a
That's always
big
good.
deal for so many years.
yeah.
And Bill Hartzler must have played his part 30 times over
He
the
was the
years.
At
original
least.
in
He
his
was
role.
original.
He was the
He was
original.
original,
Yeah.
Well, you played it. You did the part several times too, didn't you?
Yeah, I was, if I wasn't original, I was close to it. But I was always the guy with the gold,
The guy with the gold.
Yes.
the king with the bling.
Dave Shepard was part of that
He's
too.
done
often,
he's done
wasn't
some
he?
of that. But you know what I remember is George Matthews' voice.
Oh,
Oh, yes.
He was such an extraordinary narrator for the whole thing. He sort of was the glue between all the pieces. And
You're right.
he was wonderful.
George Matthews' voice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I can still hear him. It was magnificent.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah. He
so
was special.
powerful, so rich.
And I'm remembering Don Wallace also.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Oh, that's right.
you would be, he'd have a moment, to share. I'm Don Wallace. I don't think I can do it. I'm Don Wallace.
People would
It was
start
this-
to giggle. Yeah.
Fill the room.
And he did not need a microphone.
No, he didn't.
Oh my goodness.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. He was loud. Yeah. Anyway.
So I'm curious, as we're moving forward with all of our new plans and whatever, what are you all I'm just out of curiosity, what are you looking forward to in our new adventures as we move forward with our plans for new ministries and how we're structuring our service, and any thoughts on it?
This may sound like a complaint, and believe me, it is not. In other circumstances, it might be, but I am looking forward to the younger generation taking over.
Oh, some of the leadership piece.
Yeah, the leadership. To a great extent, because this is their church going forward. And I know things have shifted. I know this society has changed, for crying out loud. And we try to stay up to date, but we've still got our anchor back there in the 80s, and maybe not the technical knowledge that the kid. I mean, I'm thinking even of the kids, taking over, not just the current parents who are getting involved as it is. But yeah, I mean, I think for us to grow, I think the younger generation has got to get the leadership of this church.
They will.
They will. Oh, sure. Yeah.
I'm just also recalling the challenges of being a parent and trying to
Yes.
get kids where they need to go and have a full-time job, and
Oh, yeah.
they'll get there.
And let's face it, we have taken over from.
Yeah.
And we took our
Exactly.
time taking over from the generation
Exactly
before us.
right.
So yeah, for that reason.
Yeah.
I remember George Leonard said to me 2 or 3 times. He says, it's time for me to step back a bit. I'm not doing coffee anymore. I've done that for 25 years, and it's time for somebody else. And he said, no, I don't want to be a chair of a committee again. It's time for newer folks to step up. And I'm in that position now, still trying to listen to George's advice without much success. But anyway, yeah, we've got a brand new Christian education pastor.
Yes.
In Pastor Travis, and gee, that's kind of exciting.
It is.
And I'm sure that is a great help and will be to Shelley. It's got to be a great relief to Shelley to have somebody else to share that load with. And Shelley, my goodness, she's been with us, well, it'll be 2 years in June, I think, and my gosh, that's been wonderful having her.
Well, she keeps us busy. You know, she is not a person who lets any time pass without having multiple programs, multiple ways for people to engage,
Yeah.
and to think about how to make this a place where anybody can find something that would be of interest to them, whether it's Bible study or it's something completely different. I really appreciate her energy in thinking about that.
Making it a living church.
Yeah.
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 Yes, indeed. She does have we've got anti-racism ministry, the open and affirming ministry, we've got the anti-poverty ministry, we've got other things that have changed their names, but
Yeah.
you look at the calendar and it's busy.
It is. It is.
It's as busy as ever, even though our membership is a bit smaller than it was at its high point, but I think we're coming back. It's good to see new folks joining.
It is.
Yes.
And kids coming again, so.
Yeah. I think Shelley brings just enormous enthusiasm and energy. She's been very involved with the what used to be Christian education is now the ministry, you know. And Travis will be, I think, is going to be a very nice addition to that. You know, he's got some great ideas, and we'll see how it all plays out. So.
One other person I thought about, and I hope we're going to hear her stories on Sunday, anniversary Sunday, from Nancy Wentworth, as her mother, Jane Husted. What a force of nature. What a wonderful person she was. She did our flowers for decades and thanked us for letting her do them.
Yeah. A faithful choir member.
Faithful choir. She must have had 50 hats.
Yeah. Oh,
and
yes.
she wore different ones
Yeah.
every Sunday.
Do you know what I remember about her? When she had, there was an event at her house, and lots of people were invited. But part of her agenda was to clean out her house.
Right.
So she had gathered on tables all the things that she wanted to leave her house. And she said to each of us, you can't leave without taking at least 1 or 2 things out of the house. I still have so many candles at home that I have yet to use. But, oh gosh, she was such a generous soul, such a generous soul.
Well, my biggest memory of her was Charlie Schaefer's funeral, which was probably the hardest I've laughed in a long time. She came up, and it was kind of down up until then, I think, as some funerals go. But she came up, and if you remember the history, Charlie and Erling, her husband, were very close friends. And Erling had passed some years before. And Charlie wound up, I think, renting, they had a little kind of, what would you call it, like almost a mother-in-law suite.
Well, they had a second house.
yeah.
Second house, well, yeah,
Yeah.
okay. It was so integrated with everything, I never thought of it as a second house. But anyway, Charlie was staying there. But she came up, And she stood there just a second looking out at people. She says, I inherited Charlie from my late husband. And everybody started laughing, and then she started telling stories, and nobody could stop. Nobody could breathe, I don't think. We were laughing so hard.
Yes. That was a fantastic service. I remember the joke she told about Charlie, where Charlie was deaf, as so many of us are, but Charlie was deaf, and Jane said, I asked Charlie a question one night. He was sitting there, and he just mumbled something back to me, and I said, Charlie, you didn't hear me, did you? And he said, no, Jane, I'm sorry. I asked you a question. And he said, oh, okay, what was the question, Jane? Jane said, I forgot.
In that time.
He was a great member of our Monday morning class.
Old folks joke, and I mean, oh yeah. It was wonderful.
I remember his bread baking too. You remember that? He would take over the kitchen and make those loaves of bread. Fabulous.
Well, you want Charlie's legacy, look around this room.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That cross.
The cross.
The little cross in the back.
Paneling, yes.
The paneling.
Yeah, he was something.
The little,
The lecterns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and this little extra thing on the pulpit here to
Lift your
get within
heads.
the range of the bifocals for the certain pastors. Yeah, Charlie built everything in bookcases and all sorts of things. Yeah,
Yeah.
he was wonderful. Yes, and it was a shame the way he went, and Jenna basically was a witness when he drove out the driveway, was it? They had been here for a meeting, and she was behind him, and Charlie shouldn't have been driving at night anymore. And he drove right out into the intersection against the light and was hit. And she said his first question when she got to him was anybody hurt? Besides him.
All of us.
Nobody was, and that was good. And Charlie had a voice, didn't he?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, he could sing.
Yep.
Yeah.
He attended the Monday morning classes religiously. I mean, he was just an amazing storyteller then too, and he always had something to add to whatever the lesson was. It was, I remember when after he passed, he was a real presence missed. He was such an important part of our class.
I remember Charlie did a sermon one time that he'd gotten permission from Vern ahead of time. Charlie was CIA.
Right.
And he gave a sermon about Jesus riding the donkey, and he said what that was really set up to be was a revolt. And people were supposed to rise up, and Jesus turned them down. He went ahead to the crucifixion, but the whole thing had been set up to be a national revolt. And he had a very rational, logical explanation of how this worked, with evidence from parts of the Bible that this was a part of the story most people had never figured out.
But the spy figured it out.
The spy figured out.
Right.
Oh, and it reminds you remember Jim Weaver, who was, at one point we designated him as our pastor for tourism or whatever. And he gave the sermon one day that was, God is a Democrat. Stood right up here at the pulpit and explained exactly why God was a Democrat with chapter and verse. And it was hilarious, and there was Jim.
Well, Jim Weaver reminds me of the morning sermon in Italy that we had asked. We were in Assisi, and we had asked to use the cathedral for just a little service. And the priest said, 15 minutes? Because we told him we're just going to have this little, almost a prayer. He said, you can't give a mass in 15 minutes. And they went back and forth, and we finally said, well, okay, never mind. So we held it in a plaza. It was a parking lot, really, just kind of a drive out, overlooking the valley.
It was a beautiful view.
Gorgeous, gorgeous view. And so we held the service, and as, and I forget who was leading it, I don't think it was Jim, said amen. The bells on the cathedral rung out.
Yes, yes.
And it was, all right, thank you.
I remember that story. Yes,
it's a sign.
Yes, yes. No, you can't have a room. Your service is too short.
Right.
And then we had that outside with the view. And on the Footsteps trip to Spain, we had a similar experience in Seville, seated on the roof of the hotel we were in, which was right across from the cathedral in Seville, with a gorgeous view. And Shirley Bloomquist, yes, she was the one leading the daily meditation that day. And she had it all very nicely done. And at a certain point in her little talk, the bells started to ring. And it was perfectly timed. Again, that took me back to the Jim Weaver time in Assisi, because the same thing happened. The bells went off right on cue. And they made our little devotional and, of course, our little communion services that we would have once a week, they made them just special. Those trips were wonderful experiences. So. Oh, yes. Who have we left out among all the people with
way too many.
The Paynes, Cordelou and Marcia.
Marcia and Cordelou.
Because it crossed my mind a few minutes ago, talking about voices. Marcia would do His Eye is on the Sparrow, and she would do it a cappella, no accompaniment whatsoever, and it would bring tears to your eyes.
Ah, yeah.
She could play the piano really well, too.
She could.
Cordelou played the clarinet, didn't he?
Clarinet, sax, yeah.
And sax, yeah. And Marcia and our organist, senior moment, who was our organist?
Florence?
Florence.
Yeah.
Would do a duet.
Yes.
They
that's
would do piano four hands, and then they would do duets where one was on the piano and the other was on the organ.
Yeah.
It was amazing. We got confused every now and then, having the same last name as Marcia and Cordelou Payne, that people somehow, we didn't get their mail, but every now and then a message would come to us that was meant for them. And I may have happened the other way too, but anyway. Yes, Almut and Marcia got to be very good friends. So.
Yeah.
So, any other memories? People we've forgotten?
Probably, but...
There's probably hundreds, aren't there? Well, this has been fun.
It has been fun.